righteousness, truth, and holiness, and put on the new man, who in the likeness of God has been created in righteousness and holiness of truth. Ephesians 4:24, Western English Bible. I will take verse 24 from chapter 4 of the Epistle to the Ephesians as the subject of my lecture, and be clothed with the new man, created in the image of God in righteousness and holiness of truth. The word image is inserted in this verse. It's not in the original. It is inserted in the Bulgarian translation for greater clarity. When you study a foreign language, be it one of the old or new languages, you study speech in its simplest form. Speech consists of three basic elements: subject, predicate, and connection. That is, the subject that is being spoken about, what is being said about that subject, and the connection that can link what we think about and what we say. The Apostle Paul describes the intelligent man thus: the one who is created, he says, is in righteousness, holiness, and truth. Righteousness is the subject. Holiness is the connection. And truth is the predicate. That is what is being said about the subject. For it is only truth which, when it comes into the world, that it speaks righteousness. Righteousness is the subject, the object that must be spoken of, in order to see what righteousness consists of. Contemporary Christians now study the gospel as it was given to Christ's disciples 2,000 years ago. Most of the gospel was spoken to Christ's disciples, not to others, not to the masses. The majority listened in order to create this speech, and I call these the definitions and additions to the speech. The audience is the definition and addition to the speech. Sometimes one can do without a definition and an addition. Unless one enters into the deep meaning of that great law which regulates things, people imagine things that don't actually exist. They imagine that they have within themselves certain things that they don't. For instance, young women have such illusions. Young men have such illusions, but old grandmothers and grandfathers also have such illusions. That is to say, the illusion is the same for the old and the young. This is not a reproach, but it is a delusion pertaining to our conceptions. For instance, you walk by a street and someone looks at you, squints his eyes, and you say, "Why is he staring at me so intensely?" You can't understand that this gentleman, perhaps, is looking for some friend of his whose face looks a little like yours. You ask him, "What do you want from me?" He says, "Excuse me, sir, you looked a lot like one of my acquaintances." If this man doesn't give you any explanation, but he happens to be someone handsome, with a soft, pleasant look, you will say to yourself, "He has something for me." If his gaze is a little harsh, with a frown, you will say to yourselves, "What a beast this man is." You will form two opposing opinions about the man. This might be both true or false. Now we modern Christians are asking ourselves, why hasn't Christianity succeeded so far? Why aren't Christians as they ought to be? Because they have no subject, no predicate, and no connecting point, but they have a plethora of definitions and explanations. The qualities of the new man are righteousness, holiness, and truth. Righteousness is for the heart, for the feelings, and for the soul. Truth is for the mind and for the spirit, and holiness is an interconnection between the heart and the mind. Consequently, if righteousness has not settled in your heart as a foundation, if truth has not settled in your mind, in your thinking, and if holiness does not form a bond, a bridge for the union of the heart with the mind, I ask you, how will you understand Christ's teaching? It is incomprehensible without these qualities, and all those who experiment with it say that it is impossible. Two people gather together. They pray for someone who is sick, and as a result, he not only doesn't get well, but dies. And when he dies, in order not to expose themselves, they say, "This is how it was meant for him. This is his karma. He is a sinner. Therefore, we cannot save him." This is also something the doctors say when they don't understand their craft. The doctor gives some medicine that kills the patient, and then he says, "Looks like a complication arose." But this complication is due to the fact that the doctor couldn't give a correct diagnosis, and then he justifies it by saying that a complication arose. These complications are endless. And now Christians say, "There are complications. This cannot be understood." Well, how can it be understood when you have no righteousness in your heart? The truth hasn't settled in your mind, and you don't have holiness as a connection between the two. Consequently, this new man is now coming into the world. The old man is the one I read about in Ecclesiastes. God gave the man riches, everything his soul desired, but he didn't allow him to eat. Thus says Solomon, I ask you, if your stomach is disturbed, yet you have everything, will it enable you to eat? It won't let you. Your stomach is disturbed, but your stomach is disturbed because righteousness is not in your hearts. Every person who has a disturbed stomach should know that righteousness is not in his heart and truth is not in his mind. All the people who have upset stomachs should know that the truth is not in their minds. This is absolutely true without any exception. You say, "My stomach is upset." What should we do? You will bring the truth into your mind, and you will see that your stomach will recover. You will ask, why do we need truth? In order for the stomach to be healed. Why do we have a stomach? In order to digest the food, to release those juices that are necessary for the life of the body, for the manifestation of human life. Consequently, the simplest form in which the truth must manifest itself is for the purpose of restoring balance within the organism and to keep the cells in the stomach in their most normal state. This is how I define the truth. It is necessary to maintain your stomachs in their most normal state. This is my dose. We write istina, truth. Isi, where something is missing in you. Two elements are missing, or it means for something to enter and exit your mind, for you to learn to think. Si means those elements that are needed to expel all the layers from the mind in order for the powers of the mind to function correctly. Because, just as the mind affects the stomach, in the same way the stomach affects the food, righteousness must come to reside in the heart or in the human soul. You can say it however you like. Once righteousness lays down and resides in the human heart, in the human soul, the person will have a healthy heart, a healthy respiratory system. He won't have any palpitations. All heart defects, all diseases of the lungs are due to lack of righteousness. Consequently, if you ask me why we need righteousness in the world, since we suffer from righteousness, I will tell you, righteousness is necessary to keep your heart and lungs in harmony, because the heart is necessary to keep the lungs healthy. If you don't have righteousness, you will be exposed to having your heart and lungs corrupted. And when that happens, you will be filled with melancholy, as people today experience. If you ask me why you are melancholic, I will tell you that it is because righteousness has not laid down and settled deep into your life. Now, I am reasoning on these things on a very fundamental level, in matters of principle, just as they stand in the very existence of nature, and nature cannot concern itself with our foolish notions. When you go to nature and read Ecclesiastes, you won't say, "I know this." No, you shouldn't say what you know. Until now, everyone has only studied the definitions and additions. They talk about houses, they talk about money, they talk about business, about food, about drink, about going to bathhouses. They talk about taking walks. These are definitions and additions in life. There is no essential thought in them. I ask you, if you acquire the things you're talking about, you build several houses, you have an income in the millions, what do you gain? Will you become more beautiful? Will you become healthier? Will you have more pleasures? No, you'll have more worries. Some tenant in number such and such doesn't pay his rent. Some other person, crazy Ghana, who lives on the floor below, she also doesn't pay. All these things will start buzzing in your mind, and you'll constantly have them around as a reminder and say, "Let me see, does this one pay?" You'll have a table full of reminders. Then the judge will be like a priest who lights the oil in the lamp. How does he light the oil in the lamp? By finding the tenant. So every month you'll call over the judge to light the oil and your affairs will go well. But the world doesn't do well with these kinds of things, with lighting oil and blessing water and other things. Thousands of priests have blessed the holy water, yet the world doesn't improve. Thousands of mothers have blessed the water, yet the world doesn't improve. The people are missing something essential. The truth is not in their minds. Righteousness is not in their hearts. And holiness doesn't connect these things. Now, I don't say this about everyone. I refer to these exceptions as holy exceptions. One time when the Lord created the world, the cherubim and seraphim came to earth, and they applied the love of the people and went back. In his calculations, one of the learned and prominent angels foresaw that since these cherubim and seraphim applied love on earth, it would not bring good results to the people. In the council of the angels, he wrote and read a thorough discourse on the fact that the world must undergo a small correction. The Lord therefore sent him as a delegate to come to the kingdom of Elgamar, to be born in the house of the king of Elgamar, as the daughter of Algamar, and thus to correct this mistake. This Algamara was so beautiful, so wise and slender. Such a perfume emanated from her body that she was the most beloved of all the people. Everyone talked about her hair, her eyebrows, her ears, her fingers, all her movements. It was the talk of every house, every home, all about her extraordinary beauty. The time came for the king's daughter to marry, and the candidates began to compete with each other, and everyone, as you say, fell head over heels in love with her. I'm using an expression of yours, but I'm using it so you'll understand me, and what you mean by that, I don't know. When the first candidate showed up, she received him very kindly. She let him eat, but a few days later she said to him, "If you really love me, I want you to give me your right eye. I love it very much." She had a passion for eating eyes and tasting their sweetness. In order to show his love for her, he said, "I will take out not only one eye, but also two." He removed one of his eyes and gave it to her. She roasted it and ate it. After this, she said to him, "If your love is really strong, you will give me the other eye." I see that all of you are now starting to groan. Hold on. This is just a tale, a legend. Let me continue. She left this candidate of hers aside and began to entertain him at first, but eventually left her maidservants to deal with him. After a while, a second candidate came. She also received him graciously, fed him, gave him caresses, kisses, and flowers, and then said to him, "I like your eyes very much. I want to try one of your eyes." In order to prove his love, he removed one of his eyes and offered it to her. She roasted it and ate it. She asked for his other eye too. He took out the second one and remained completely blind. And so, year after year, a number of candidates appeared, and the king's daughter did the same with all of them. All her suitors remained blind. I ask you now, what do you understand from this legend? What did the angel who came to fix the world do? In your language, you use the expression that the heart is blind. There is another legend, according to which you say that a person gets married on a blind Sabbath. I don't know where this blind Sabbath came from. Could the Sabbath be blind? When the king's daughter was asked why she acted this way with her suitors, she replied, "He who laid his eyes on my face even once. I don't want another image of another face to ever enter into his soul. Throughout his whole life, he must carry only the image of my face in his soul. He must remain blind to all the other faces in the world." Consequently, when righteousness, truth, and holiness incarnate within a person, they will remove his eyes. And when Christ says that we must renounce everything, he means that we must forget the world, that we must live with only one image of one face, because you know what happens when two images enter us. When two images enter into the heart of a woman, you know what happens. Let the men answer. And when two images enter a man's heart, you know what happens. Let the women answer. Al-Gemara knew this, and that's why she solved the matter by saying, "The heart must be blind, that is, the first image of a face that is perceived by God. Only it must remain in your soul, and you must remain blind for everything else." So now, those of you whose eyes have not yet been removed, there is strife among you. I know those whose eyes are not plucked out. Those whose eyes have been plucked out by the king's daughter are satisfied with everything. Some maidservant comes to them, touches them. They all think that the king's daughter is with them. And those whose eyes the king's daughter hasn't taken out, and whose eyes remain open, there are disputes in those homes and families. And so, certain people in this world are blind when it comes to evil, and others are not. If you ask me why evil reigns in the world, I will tell you. Evil reigns in the world because all these people have not gone to the king's daughter. They have not fallen in love with her. They do not know what she wants from them. And she has not taken out their eyes, but one day, when they come to her, she will treat them as she treats all her suitors, and they will sacrifice their eyes for her. This is just a story with which some people want to give a lesson to others. But if we are to take the subject literally, we will find many people in the world with their eyes gouged out, without their lives even improving. A person can even remove both eyes and still remain evil. In the occult sense, this blindness implies man's will, which is in a position to direct the mind from one situation to another, from one state to another. That is, to have the will to look only to those things that bring you good, and not at those that bring you evil. Or, as modern people say, to understand the essence of things, their real value, because every man, when given a gold coin, looks at it, and when he believes in its price, puts it in his pocket, and if he sees that it is fake, he pays no attention to it. And so, by her act, the king's daughter wanted to say that in order to fix the eyesight of mankind, so that the human sight would be corrected, she must take out the eyes of her suitors, so that they, as her beloved ones, can see through her eyes. This is also a fact. A child, before he is born, looks through his mother's eyes, and then they understand each other well. the boy sees through his father's eyes. But once the mother creates the body of the daughter or son, an argument immediately ensues between the mother and father. Why? Because the children see through four eyes. And now the Bulgarians make use of that proverb, "May your eyes look in four directions." I don't know what they mean by this, to look with four eyes, to have four eyes. A man should have four eyes only when he steals. He should have four eyes only when he lies, when he commits crimes. I don't know what they mean by that, to look with four eyes, to have four eyes. The Bulgarians use this proverb in the following sense: in order that your interests may never be harmed, you must have four eyes. Open your eyes in all fours, lest someone lie to you or deceive you. Paul turns to the Christians and says, "Let us all put on the new man." You know the old man very well, both daughters and sons, mothers and fathers, judges and priests. You're all very acquainted with this old man. You understand his speech very well. You studied his language. And all of our present culture is an expression of this old man. Everything that now exists in the old culture is mainly an expression of this old man. This old man is unable to understand Christ's teachings. In order to understand Christ's teaching, the new teaching, both Christ and Paul said that the first thing that is for man is to be born anew, to become a new man with new understandings. And Paul says that the qualities of the new man must be the following. He must have righteousness in the heart, truth in the mind, and holiness as the connecting thread between the mind and the heart. Only with these qualities will man be able to understand the new teaching. I ask you now, when you prove yourselves, do you reveal righteousness, truth, and holiness? When you get offended, when you get angry, do you get offended in righteousness, truth, and holiness? When you lie, do you lie in righteousness, truth, and holiness? When you are envious, do you envy in righteousness, truth, and holiness? When you love, yes, you can love in righteousness, truth, and holiness. You can love when you are in righteousness, truth, and holiness. You can be compassionate when you are in righteousness, truth, and holiness. All the positive qualities in the person, all the virtues manifest through righteousness, truth, and holiness. Contemporary Christians have no connection with Christ. In order to put on the new man, they must have a connection with this new man. Only then will the conditions be created for Christ to come among both of you and them. You can spend your whole life in church, in burning incense and lighting oil. You can spend your whole life in reading the Bible and interpreting it differently. And all of this is not only not good, but it is also useless. It will not lead you to that great truth for which your soul longs. Reason correctly. Take any scientist, any philosopher, and you will see that he too still needs to find a soulmate who loves him, with whom he can exchange at least 2 words. Whether this man is a preacher, or a mother, or a father, or a brother-in-law, he will always wish to have a soulmate with whom he can exchange 2 words. I ask, how can these 2 souls connect? 2 minds cannot connect in the same place, and 2 hearts cannot connect in the same place. No, the law states 1 heart and 1 mind can connect, or 1 mind and 1 heart can connect. There is a connection between the mind and the heart. 2 minds are from the same category. A mind with a mind is still just a mind. This is monotony in life, in nature. A heart with a heart is also monotonous. If you don't believe this, gather together 2 or 3 women who are easily affected, who live in their feelings, and one day they'll raise a ruckus. They'll get into an argument. So if you gather only hearts in one place, you'll gather together the greatest evil. Consequently, you must gather them like this: one heart with one mind with one heart, one heart, one mind, one heart. When you join these hearts with minds and cross them together, you will have harmony. If you lose the first connection, if you don't have a connection between your mind and heart, that is, if you don't understand righteousness, truth, and holiness, the main issues that now remain to be resolved, they will remain unresolved for you. Why? Because if righteousness and truth don't form a foundation on which God can come to live, everything is lost. Now many people are asking me, who is this man who is speaking there? It is not a question what I am. I am the man in whom righteousness lives in the heart, truth in the mind, and holiness forms a bond between them. Why? Because this is the great law of God, and I obey it, and I decided to do His will, and I rejoice in fulfilling this law. I also say to you, you will know who I am, but how and when? When righteousness enters into your heart, truth in your mind, and holiness serves as a connecting thread. Under present conditions, you will never know who I am and what I am. So, you can understand what is in me only when it also enters you. And so, I resolve the matter on principle. Don't fool yourselves into thinking that you are Orthodox, or Evangelicals, or Baptists, or Theosophists. All of these are beautiful names. In the hearts of the Orthodox, the Evangelists, righteousness must reign. In their minds, truth and holiness must form a bond. In the hearts of the Theosophists and Spiritists, righteousness must reign. In their minds, truth and holiness must form a bond. In all this, there must be one and the same connection, one and the same subject, one and the same predicate. This subject and predicate I call the divine subject, the divine predicate, and the divine relationship in the reality of the world. And if your affairs in the world are not going well, if you are unhappy, if you are entangled, all this is due to the lack of this righteousness, truth, and holiness. When God wants to mend hearts, He will destroy this. The scripture says, "Do not say a bare word before the angel who guides you, for God will destroy your works." If you do not respect your angel and say a bad word, all this will be blown out of your heart, and you will remain an idiot. You will remain the biggest wretch. Why? Because you threw away righteousness, which is the foundation of true wealth, of true knowledge. And so, if you don't apply these qualities into your life, you will go bankrupt. Regardless of who you are, if you have doubts, you will end up experiencing all the most terrible sufferings. For all those who have not put this great law in their minds, the greatest sufferings are coming. Everyone will experience them, and when the sufferings come, you will know that they are due to the fact that righteousness is not in your hearts, and truth is not in your minds. In order to deliver yourselves from this, apply this dose I have prepared. It's not enough for you to merely say, "I believe, I love the Lord." You cannot love until you have righteousness in your hearts. You cannot think until you have truth in your minds, and you cannot do anything sublime until you have holiness within you, like a connecting thread. Every action that is about to be performed obeys only such a will. When Christ says, "If you have faith the size of a grain of a mustard seed, you will be able to tell this forest to move," He is referring to the man in whom righteousness, truth, and holiness live. Don't be under the illusion that you can do without these qualities. Some of you study the occult. By this method, you may have some results, but in the end, you will not reach the goal you are striving for. Now some people come and ask, "Why is he preaching?" I am not preaching a doctrine out of thin air. But I am preaching a strictly defined teaching and saying righteousness is necessary. Why? In order to regulate your stomach on earth. If you have a well-regulated stomach, you will be able to do all your work calmly. And if you are mothers, your children will be good. If you are students, your teachers will be good. If you have an enlightened mind, you will be able to reason correctly, and everyone will admire you. Holiness is necessary to temper your will so that you don't stop before any difficulties in the world. Is this clear to you? Good. If you don't believe, try it. If you don't try it, it's a sin to your soul. Consequently, every religion, every teaching must be specific and strictly defined. The Christianity you have today is a mess. An Orthodox mess, an evangelical mess, a sabbatical, theosophical, spiritistic, and human mess. It's all a mess. Every nation in the world must have righteousness in its heart. Truth in its mind and its will must be tempered into holiness. Every home, every society, every church, every school must have righteousness in its heart, truth in its mind, and its will tempered in holiness, without any exception. Then we'll have a great culture. And not like it is nowadays. When you go outside, you start going buzz, buzz, buzz. Everyone is buzzing. There's buzzing everywhere. There's nothing positive. Today, some people say there is a God. Tomorrow, others say there is no God. Another kind of people say God is in heaven. Well, where is heaven? Do you know it? We presume we know. Well, then, what is earth? We walk on it. That which you are walking on is not the earth, and that which you see is not heaven. You find yourselves in the following situation. You are in the following situation. A Russian king gave a great preacher a task to solve. He had to answer 3 important questions. Instead of the preacher, a monk appeared before him who was dressed and disguised like the preacher, and he answered 2 of the questions. Regarding the 3rd question, he answered, "I know what your thought is. You think I am the preacher whom you wanted to solve these questions. You still don't understand what heaven is. It's a country, a concept. You don't understand what the earth is either. I don't dispute that you don't know what the earth is, but what you see is neither heaven nor earth. If you look at heaven and earth through the eyes of righteousness, of truth, you will have a different philosophy with which you will cardinally solve all the questions that now preoccupy you, all the disputes that arise among you. You will object to me. We listened to such people who said these things. I believe that you listened. Many have spoken to you about righteousness, truth, and holiness, but I wish you could find a preacher in England, in America, or anywhere else who spoke to you about these things as I have spoken to you. Let them make an experiment by putting their school alongside this school you are in now and compare. Let them see their results along with yours. Why am I talking like this? Because I don't want to have my eyes plucked out a second time. The person who has had both his eyes plucked out says, "No, I'm not undergoing such an operation a second time." Now I'm telling you one side of this story. Perhaps I will tell you the second side of this great story in another lecture some other day. It's a story that all of mankind passes through. So, if your mind suffers, put truth in it. If your heart suffers, put righteousness into it. If your will is not tempered, put holiness into it. Here is a way to temper yourselves and live. What comes out of the person in whom there is no righteousness, truth, and holiness? If you don't have righteousness, truth, and holiness, then love cannot appear. Then what happens? The young women take a little rose oil and they spray it on their heads. Another time they take a little violet essence, They sprays themselves. The young man, when he passes by such a young woman, smells her and says, "Ah, it's her." It's not her. The one who resolves the issues is not the one to whom they are given for resolution. If righteousness enters into your heart, truth into your mind, and holiness into your will, you will certainly have a different fragrance. The fragrance that will emanate from your body is called nux. It is the most beautiful smell, the most wonderful nectar that nature created. So when you unite righteousness, truth, and holiness into one, only in this way will you be able to form this nectar within you, the nux. Consequently, every person who applies this nectar will have a result. If he's blind, his eyes will open. If he's deaf, his ears will hear. If he's sick, he'll be healed. You can achieve everything with this nectar. This is an alchemical compound, the element which alchemists have been searching for centuries to find in order to rejuvenate life with it. And I'm telling you now, all of you can do your own experiments in the retort in order to find this nux. You can make experiments every day. You can even crack 100 retorts. Think nothing of it. Don't wait for others to find it. When you acquire this nectar one day, you will be the happiest people in the world, and your joy will be so great that no one will be able to describe it. And what will be the juice of this compound? Love. I'm not referring to the love you know now, but regarding the juice of this nectar that carries life within it. Put on the new man, created in the image of God in righteousness, truth, and holiness. Once you put on the new man, your temple will be renewed. The divisions in life will disappear. I now meet many people who say that they are blessed, that they had the visitation of the Blessed Spirit, that they have joy in their hearts, and I, according to my science, as I understand things, see that these people fundamentally lack what they need. They are as sectarian as other people. The person says the Spirit of God visited him, yet he makes such a sharp distinction between other people, just like any sectarian. Joy is not the best sign that the Spirit of God has visited you. Cheerfulness is not always a sign that the Spirit of God visited you. A good disposition is not always a sign that the Spirit of God visited you, that the Spirit of God is present. You will say that so-and-so repented. Repentance is not a sign that the Spirit of God is present. The fact that you paid off your debt doesn't show that you are an honest man. You might have the intention of making something, but it is only when righteousness enters your heart and when truth enters your mind, only then will you become one with Christ and can say that you are one with Him. And then, whatever we ask will be given to us. Ask in the name of the Lord, and all things shall be given to you. Some people who don't understand this law say, "Let's beg and ask from the Lord." The apostles, 12 in number, who were Christ's first disciples, among whom was also the apostle Peter, succeeded in removing Peter's shackles with prayers. And you say to yourselves, "There was a time when the apostles prayed. Then the angel came and freed Apostle Peter. Let us pray too." You pray, yet nothing happens. And then you say to yourselves, "Well, it is true that it happened during the time of the apostles. It happens now too." However, the apostles had the truth in their minds, righteousness in their hearts, holiness in their will, and the Lord was with them. And now, since it's not like this, the Lord is also not with you. What is happening now is what the Bulgarians are doing, what the English are doing, and so on. You say, "We must now do the things that are written in the gatherings and councils, but when we die, then our eyes will be opened." This will never happen. Do not fool yourselves. The things I speak to you do not agree with the church. If I speak to you according to the church, I am a vagabond. My teaching is according to God. This teaching must be absolutely in accordance with God's law. It must not have any exceptions, and it must not agree with any churches, with any councils. The teachings of all churches and councils must agree with God's law. If they do not agree with God's law, they are from the evil one. And those who want to judge me, let them judge me. But I would ask them, is righteousness in your hearts, truth in your minds, and holiness in your will? If they lack these things, they cannot judge me. Some church wants to judge me. I ask, does the church have righteousness? Does it have truth? It doesn't. Then this church cannot judge me. Some nation wants to judge me. I ask this nation, does righteousness live in the heart of this nation? Does the truth live in the mind of this nation? No. Then it cannot judge me either. I accept judgment. I accept to be judged only by righteous people, only by true people, and by people in whom holiness lives. Whatever judgment such people give me, I accept it. And even if the lowliest man from any church, the lowliest man from any nation lives with righteousness, truth, and holiness, and condemns me, I accept his judgment. If such a man lacks these qualities, even if he is a king, I will not give a single hair from my head or my beard. This is the way you must understand things if you want to be free citizens in the kingdom of God. If not, there is another kingdom. They will shave your wool, take 2 skins from you, take your milk, and let the children play with your lambs. You'll say, come on, let's wait a year. The second year we'll work for righteousness and for truth. Since you procrastinate, this will never come. This Lord, who sent you to earth, has inscribed the following on the door through which the spirits come down to earth. Everyone who comes down to earth to learn, to complete his education, must put righteousness in his heart, truth in his mind, and holiness in his will. And whoever does not do this must never be allowed to pass through this door. This is what is written. I have read this inscription on the door, and if you don't believe it, go read it. Ask your saints and let them verify my statement, whether or not it is written like this on the door. But there is another door, a second one, which you have passed through, and this is what it says. You must not concern yourselves with truth. It is an idle thing. And you shouldn't deal too much with righteousness, and you cannot live with holiness. If you want to live, you don't need righteousness, nor truth, nor holiness. So now you mixed these 2 inscriptions and say, one cannot live with righteousness, truth, and holiness. Not every person can be righteous, truthful, or holy. No. Anyone can be truthful and must be truthful. Anyone can speak the truth. Anyone can be truth-loving and live with the truth. This is the essential teaching, which is of cardinal importance for all of you personally. And when you apply it on earth, you will solve all the questions that concern you, as it should be. Consequently, all of you must uphold these 3 principles in yourselves. If you do not put righteousness in your heart, truth in your mind, and holiness in your will, nothing will come out. If you wait for your priests to sanctify themselves so that you will follow them, nothing will come out. You say, why don't you be holy so I can also become holy after you? No, you cannot pass by someone and become like this. Every person must be holy for himself. You say to Christ, do you know, there was a time when we were present at your sermons. I take Christ because he is an authority figure to you. Yes, but what did Christ say? Depart from me, you who have hitherto labored in unrighteousness, to whom righteousness has not been in your hearts. Depart from me, you to whom truth has not been in your minds, and holiness has not been in your wills. This is the correct translation of Christ's words. And when you apply this translation in your lives, then it has meaning. But in the Gospels, it is written differently. I now see a certain uneasiness in you. You say to yourselves, we spent so many years as Christians, yet now we don't have righteousness in our hearts, truth in our minds, and holiness in our will? Then what is all this about? The smallest foot of righteousness has barely entered your hearts. The smallest foot of truth has barely entered your minds, and the smallest foot of holiness has barely entered your wills. It is not the foot of righteousness that must enter into your hearts, but righteousness in its entirety. It is not the foot of truth that must enter into your minds, but truth in its entirety. It is not the foot of holiness that must enter into your wills, but holiness in its entirety. This is the great law. O Israel, Israel, you pass for Israelites. When the evangelist starts singing, they say, Zion, you Jerusalem. They wait for Christ to come from above. When Christ comes, the evangelists will appear before him and say, Lord, we nearly deafened the world by proclaiming your gospel. There's almost no place on earth where we didn't go and print the word. It's even in China and Japan. Christ will ask them, how did you proclaim the gospel? With righteousness in your hearts, with truth in your minds, and with holiness in your will? Did you preach with money? Yes, with money. Well, why don't you move aside? I'll keep you in mind. This is what Christ will say. Then the Orthodox will come before Christ and say to him, Look, Lord, see what Christ says. How many churches we built because of you? See how much oil we burned, how many prayers we made because of you, how many heretics we burned. Christ will ask you, how did you do this? With righteousness in your hearts, truth in your minds, and holiness in your will. Did you preach with money? Yes, there was money. There were discussions in the churches. Christ will tell you, you too must move aside. I'll keep you in mind. And what will happen? You'll see all these saints lined up on the left side of Christ. He'll always keep them in mind. They are the people who understood the profound science of money and its power in the world, what it does. This is what Napoleon says. This is also what the Bulgarian poet Slaveykov says. He praises money like this. Oh, money, money, ever-powerful money, with you in heaven, without you in hell. The simple-minded carry a pickaxe, while the wealthy are without a pickaxe. But when Christ comes, Slaveykov will praise it differently. He will speak differently. You say, when will Christ come? If righteousness does not enter into your hearts, truth into your minds, and holiness into your will, Christ will never come. However, if you put righteousness in your hearts, truth in your minds, and holiness in your will today, Christ will come immediately. But in order for righteousness to enter into your hearts, what tremendous efforts are required? Now a number of pamphlets are being published to defend the truth, to defend the church. But until today, I have not seen a pamphlet that defends other interests. Evangelistic interests, Orthodox interests, among others. You say, these people are right. Yes, they're right. They're right without righteousness. They're truthful without actual truth. And they're holy without holiness in the world. The Apostle Paul says, put on the new man who is created in the image of God, in righteousness, holiness, and truth. Consequently, the current Christians shouldn't fool themselves. They have to radically transform their lives, not with weeping, but they have to radically alter their lives in accordance with the divine laws. Life on earth must be applied according to the earthly way, but when you go above, there you will apply everything according to the divine way. If you want to apply Christ's teachings on earth, if you want to be strong, look for the sin in your heart, in your mind, and in your will. This is not a reproach, but I tell you, do this. This is what Christ preached. After these three elements, righteousness, truth, and holiness, have entered into you, the new life will come to you, which is necessary for everyone. This new life will not deny the nations. It will revive them. It will revive societies, homes, fathers, mothers, priests. It will not destroy the world, but transform it, causing it to undergo a radical transformation. When righteousness is brought into our hearts, truth into our minds, and holiness into our will, then the new life will come to all the nations. Until these three elements are put in place as the foundation of life, the new life will not come. So, if someone asks you, what is the fundamental difference between your teachings and other teachings, you will tell him, our teachings say this, that we should be made in the image of God, in the image of the new man created in righteousness, truth, and holiness. But what is righteousness? What is truth? And what is holiness? What are they? You will tell them that righteousness must reside in our hearts, truth in our minds, and holiness in our will, in our strength, in our body, and our life must be in harmony everywhere. This is the practical application of our teaching. I can tell you something symbolically, but I am now telling you three things which, if you do them, will yield results. Then you will know Christ, and Christ will know you. However, you will not know the historical Christ who suffered on the cross, but the resurrected Christ who came out of the grave. And I call the resurrection a manifestation of God's love. Resurrection without love cannot happen. A person rises only when love illuminates him, and you have also had such a resurrection. If you have these three elements in you, Christ will come to you. You will be one with Christ, and you will be able to say, Christ and I are one. But now you say, I love Christ so much, if only he knew how I want to embrace him. Yes, you love him without righteousness. You think of him without truth, and you embrace him without holiness. I don't want such embraces that are done only externally. We want a heart that conveys love. We want a mind whose thought is satiated with truth. We want a will that embraces with holiness. When everything in us is holy, then the caresses, the kisses, and the embraces will be holy as well. And when someone touches you with such holiness, you will experience joy. But now, when someone touches you, you say, Ouch! What happened to me? One evening, a black man kissed an American woman. He had a soft, pleasant voice, and at first, she didn't question him about the incident. But in the light of the lantern, she noticed he was a black man and turned him over to the authorities. He was ordered to pay $50,000. Why? Because he gave a kiss without righteousness, without truth, and without holiness. Some say, when Mr. Deunov speaks like this, he's going to destroy the youth. No. I understand the kiss of righteousness, of truth, of holiness. I understand the embrace of righteousness, of truth, of holiness. Only such kisses and embraces give strength and life to the world. And where there aren't any, then there aren't really any kisses or embraces at all. They're far from you. You have been searching for the world for 2,000 years, looking for Christ and thinking that you found him. You tell someone, Come so I can tell you where to find Christ. Very nice, but I ask you, is righteousness in your hearts, truth in your minds, holiness in your will? If you have these elements, you will find Christ. But if you don't, everyone will deceive you, telling you that every priest and every bishop is Christ. You will know that this is so according to the following. If you don't fulfill the advice of the priest, he will kick you out. If you don't fulfill the advice of an evangelical preacher, he will kick you out. He put a label that says, "In Christ's name." I would put up another label that describes him. "In my name, nobody is going to listen to you." They talk about Christ, yet they gather up all the oil. They leave nothing for Christ himself. There's eating and drinking, all in the name of Christ. Yet however much profit there is, everything gets snatched away. What is the profit? Since we have been preaching for so many thousands of years, I ask those who are in the church, how grateful are they to be in the church? How many will show up? I am not saying that there are absolutely none, but all those who have come to know Christ are outside the church, outside society. Why so? Because any man who preaches true doctrine today will be called a crazy, unbalanced man. A man who is off his rocker. In a word, the worst man. Indeed, the worst people are those who have righteousness in their hearts, truth in their minds, and holiness in their will. And whatever happens in the world, some crop failure, some epidemic comes, they always blame these people for such misfortunes. Consequently, the Orthodox say, the only holy people are those within the Orthodox Church. The evangelists say the same, that the holiest people can be found among the evangelists, and that there is no other church like theirs. I ask, well, if you are all holy people, how has this holiness not come to light? I ask, if the mother and father are holy people, how is it possible for them to give birth to a criminal? This is incompatible with God's law. A wolf gives birth to a wolf. A sheep gives birth to a sheep. According to the law of birth, like begets like. Yet we console ourselves and say, there's an exception here. We don't know which one of our ancestors this child resembles. No, woman, admit the truth and say that when you conceived this child, righteousness was not in your heart, truth was not in your mind, and holiness was not in your will. When a father gives birth to a son, let him say, Lord, I know that when I conceived this son, righteousness was not in my heart, truth was not in my mind, holiness was not in my will. Let those young women and men who are going to marry, before they give birth, put these three elements into themselves, and they will then have the most beautiful children. Their home will be the best. Nowadays, when a young man marries, he needs to ask himself, is there righteousness in my heart? Is there truth in my mind? Is there holiness in my will? If he can answer himself and say that he has all these elements, he should get married. And the young woman should also ask herself, if the righteousness, truth, and holiness give an answer within her, telling her she can indeed marry, then let her marry. If the young man and woman proceed like this, they will have all the joys and their home will be covered with flowers inside. So, there is another law in the world, according to which you must make three connections. These are earthly connections, spiritual connections, and divine connections. Earthly connections are human connections. Spiritual connections are angelic connections. And there are also divine connections. And when you make a combination, you must have three of these connections at the same time. If you are connected only on earth, then you have only one connection. This connection is seen by clairvoyance. And if the soul has only one such connection, and if this connection is broken, the soul goes unseen. In the spiritual world, the soul has more connections. And in the divine world, everything is connected. There are no exceptions. So, when love comes to earth, in order to make a true connection, it must also be made in the spiritual and divine world. When a connection is made in righteousness, truth, and holiness, it is a true combination, and such a combination is blessed by God. Whatever work you undertake, whatever life you want to live, you must have these three connections, these three elements within you. Only then will the great wisdom, the great teaching for which your souls yearns, only then can it come. This is a philosophy that can only then be spoken of. Given this hesitation, this doubt, nothing can come out. You say, I have righteousness, I have truth and holiness. Good. Then the second phase must occur. I ask you, did Christ come? He came. Then the third phase, Christ and I will come, and we will make a dwelling in you, and I will reveal myself. And so the first phase, righteousness, truth, and holiness, must come within you. The second phase, Christ and I will come to make a dwelling in you. And the third phase, I will reveal myself through you. So, if righteousness dwells in your heart, and you dwell in righteousness, if truth dwells in your mind, and you dwell in truth, if holiness dwells in your will, and you dwell in holiness, then my Father and I will come to make our dwelling in you. My Father and I will manifest ourselves to you and be one. Everything outside of this is only a series of illusions, only a chasing after the lost woman, Stanka, only exhausting life. This is how seriously every person must consider the issue, and put on the new man, who in the likeness of God has been created in righteousness and holiness of truth. Lecture held on the 26th of June, 1921.